Hello to everybody, hello to our public, hello who is following us on Instagram. First, I would like, in the name of all of us, to thank the curator of magnificent Italian pavilion this year, Eugenio Viola, as well as coordinator of the public program, Adriana Rispoli, for their kind invitation. Here with us today in the Museum of Contemporary Art Zagreb is Vesna Vuković, art historian and curator, who in her project dealt with the research of art that thematize industrialization. Then here with us also artist Neli Ružić, multimedia artist and professor at Art Academy in Split, and photographer Bojan Mrđenović, and also videographer, I would say, also lecturer at the Academy of Dramatic Arts in Zagreb. But I would say, first of all, they are here to present their projects that in a context of our topic. At the time when I started to think about this conversation, it was one very small but one very indicative and very important exhibition in a small gallery called Spots, curated by great art historian Sandra Križić-Roban. Although it was not dedicated directly about the topic of industry and globally of industrialization and decay of industry in Croatia. Then about some other subject, commercial chain in small towns around Zagreb in continental Croatia, with significant name Budućnost, which means future, the future. And that inspired me on some way, and I decided to start this conversation with that example of the actually, because of sudden awareness of such a long period of almost 30 years, in which the subject of collapse of the socialist heritage appears in the work of artists all these years with almost the same intensity. It was a small, but as I said, important exhibition. One photographer was Darko Bavoljak, and the other Bojan Mrđenović, who is with us today, who is 26 younger photographer. Darko Bavoljak's 7 photos were created while the artist, as a soldier, was in the middle of the battlefield in 1992. And there are dramatic black and white photographs, which I would say, from the perspective of recent Croatian art history, appeared as the first indication of what would happen in the economic sphere after the scars of war, of the scars of this actually material destruction. Unlike him, the first photos of Bojan Mrđenović, please can you show a little bit these cycles of Darko Bavoljak? Budućnost, and then we will talk a little bit about your photos with the same topic, title, Budućnost, which means the future. These are Darko's Bavoljak photos from from war periods, from battlefields, taken as a soldier. And then Bojan's photos who focus actually at the same motive. Bojan is from that area, from Kutena, isn't it, Bojan? Daruvar, yeah, okay. But you grow up in that area, and what is visible here is the other way how he took these photos. We can notice here already this that they are taken from with a historical distance as archival material with which he recorded not only this destroyed logo Budućnost, the future, this typography from 50s which evokes the first consumerist habits of self-service store in next Yugoslavia, but the wider context in which the architecture itself is located. That was just a small associative frame, and now we are ready to start with our topic. I would ask Vesna. Vesna's path as curator and researcher was marked from the very beginning by activities in the context of the association block, which means local base for
cultural refreshment.
Cultural refreshment, great.
It's a funny name.
Actually, that was one of the earliest, if not the first one, curatorial collective NGO collective that emerged as a platform for a systematic articulation of resistance to all that what was happening as a consequences of transition project. Block created actually a platform for artists for the production of work of art, but also you start with the first books and other publishing, education, and engagement that in all segments warned the public about this catastrophic situation of workers who lost their jobs, as well as the other side effects of that followed. Sudden privatization and collapse of giant factories that until recently were actually the axis of economy in the country.
Yes, Rada. Block was one of actually many, I would say, collectives and organizations that appeared on what is still known as it is locally called here, independent art, contemporary art or cultural scene. And it was in a very specific period in the early 2000s after the right-wing government finally lost the elections, so there was a political turn at that period, and which is also marked by so-called EU integration processes, so opening up of Croatia towards the European Union. And so after this dark period of 1990s, which we have seen through the photographies of by Darko Bavoljak, this period is something like a big turn, so to say, which has really, and I can say it like almost or more than, how long, it's like 22 years, 20 years after that, it's really a specific and very exciting period. So we as a collective called Block started with a program under the umbrella title Urban Festival. It was a festival of artistic intervention in public spaces, so it was spread all over the city, and it tangled these rapid transformation of public spaces all over in Zagreb. Of course, all of these transformations are due to the change of production, so to say, so change of the system we live in. And we tackled many of these topics in the duration of 15 years, as long as Urban Festival, so it took part from 2001 to 2015. And from the very beginning on, we have treated the public space not as just like a free stage or another white cube, which is open to like a stage for tackling hot issues or problematic issues in society, but also, so not as a neutral space, but as a space which is also constructed by various and economic, political processes, and which is built by different networks of powers and such things. So the very topic of industrialization wasn't the only one. It was always, so to say, somewhere in the background, so to say, because it has to do with the processes of systemic change of the ownership and things like that. But I would like to start, I will now choose few examples, but I would like to start with one which I find important, not so much maybe in the artistic sense, but again as a contextual point. And this is the event called the Operation City, which took part in 2005. Here on the screen we see a huge abandoned liquor factory called Badel, and before that called Arco, which is an example of protected industrial heritage, which is really falling apart, and it's in the very center of the city, actually. So this building was the location of this huge manifestation, which lasted for 10 years and gathered together around 1550 organizations, art collectives, and initiatives on the cultural scene. And the idea behind this was to actually claim this space. So this scene, which I said was really like proliferating, flowering from the early 2000s, was somehow wanted to get its material support, so to say. So spaces and symbolic recognition, I would say now, 15 years after. So the Urban Festival that year in 2005 took part in this building among all these initiatives. I will just briefly present an artwork which was part of it. It is a piece by Croatian artist Ana Hušman. It's called In the Place of a Place. Ana has, together with platform 9,81, whose members were mapping the ex-industrial spaces all over Zagreb in the framework of their project Invisible Zagreb, a guide for squatters. And I say this because I want to point out that the prevailing and the dominant idea in that period was that in all these abandoned ex-production spaces lies some potential. It was really, I mean, maybe nowadays it would rather sound naive, but it was like the spirit of that moment. Like there is a potential in that spaces, potential for some new typologies of public, and if we put, so to say, or if we bring, or if we find ways to put some new, mostly artistic or cultural content in them, these events or these content will serve as a kind of engine of change, of their transformation, of catalyst for some really positive processes which run contrary to these images of total catastrophe and decay, which ruined like the whole country, industry, families, lives, etc., etc. But what I wanted to say, so this was this very, very optimistic wheel which gathered together so many activists, and Anna Hušman has, so to say, followed platform in their mapping, and she took these videos of these abandoned spaces. And one thing so this is the installation by Anna Hušman. It comprised of 56 videos together with the jars. You see jars here. Jars are like an archaeological gesture, so to say. They conserve like part of the buildings which are really unrecognizable. These are really like, they could be whenever, but they are, each of the jars is followed by a video. And these videos are really, when I think about it, like with the hindsight, really put in the first plan usage of this space, which is not productional, but which is kind of what's the word? A claiming space for themselves by the workers. So she was really filming these details of how they really manage to customize their working spaces and so on. And this, like, in a way, intimate memory, but also as a way to show that these spaces really belong to the workers. I read it nowadays and then like that, and that was really interesting, especially in this effort to reclaim it for the cultural workers. So this was this first period. I have to be brief for the sake of the discussion, but I will now jump 5 years or 8 years later. I have to say that this wave of optimism was so cut down or slowered by the financial crisis of 2007-8, and there came the first disillusionment, so to say, awakening of this dream of a better future to come tomorrow as soon as we pass the transition and get rid of whatever primitive government and things like that. So that the reasons why the situation is very poor and it's getting poorer are more structural and they are global. So it was also followed by another very important event, and it was the student movement and also Right to the City movement. So this is like two events which were crucial for the new generation, for my generation, for my at least political generations, so to say. And they brought about a really new perspective now. It wasn't anymore this naive, blind optimism, but even another different look and different perspective on the socialist experience, I would say. So I will now show briefly 3 projects which we did as a blog. If I have enough time, Rada, is it okay? I'm talking. Okay. I tend to talk a lot. Excuse me all. So this is Shipyard, 3rd May in Rijeka. And the project I wanted to just briefly show took part in Rijeka at the invitation of Museum of Modern and Contemporary Art as part of their program Spajalica. and it tackled the role of shipyard industry for the whole city of Rijeka, and how we called it ship equals city, or ship is a city, in a formula which gathers together that the whole Rijeka builds the ship, because it's a very complex industry which really develops the whole city, which develops the culture as well, not to mention a lot of amateurs, cultural workers club that were part of the shipyard, but also brings money and resources to the cultural institutions, and also the city of course brings back to the shipyard at least the labor force. So what we did, we have chosen this building. It's a famous Riječka banka built by an architect Kazimir Ostrogović in 1965. Riječka banka was also important for the shipyard industry, but not to go into such a details. And it is a social center of the city where many people gathered. So in this action, together with Rafaela Dražić and around 20 journalist activists, also unionists from the shipyard industry, which was being privatized at this period, we have put this parolas and contributions on the surface of the building as a night action, trying to support workers' struggle for shipyard, but also to connect cultural production and industrial production. The other project took part a year later, 2014, in collaboration with an artist, Selma Banić, in a small town of Križevci in northern Croatia, which again had a factory in its focus, this time Križevčanka, a meat factory, which really nurtured the whole city, and has this name Križevčanka. It means a woman from the town of Križevci. And these are the working clothes we have still find as some kind of apparitions. They were in these abandoned spaces like 20 years after. And we will, you will see it later, we have brought them to the main square. But what we did, we connected the shutting down of Križevčanka and all these structural changes it brought together with a historical story of Magda Herucina, which was a witch from Križevci, which was not killed due to some very specific historical circumstances, not to go into them right now to lose time. But we have, so this witch hunt was, as we all know from the book by Silvia Federici, is also connected to the beginnings of capitalism, privatization of knowledge, enclosing processes, and so on. So we also use this name, Križevčanka, and this specific gender dimension of its name to connect it to a further historical process of starting capitalism. So starting capitalism anew in Križevci, and what has it done for the Križevci as a city and for the women of Križevci. And these really very simple handmade by us leaflets were all over the city with some very disturbing numbers of unemployment of women who lost their jobs in the industry, and the mentioned working clothing we have found in the factory. We have put on this new main square, which was also like the city is falling apart, but the new main square was really refurbished and beautified and totally killed, like all the green and trees were off, and all we have is this beautiful stage which no one uses. So we put this clothing workers, clothing as a symbolic gesture of opening the connections between the industry and the spatial transformations in Križevci. And the last one, which I will show just briefly, is a mural by collective Kurs, which they have done to somehow symbolically represent a workers' struggle, workers from the ITAS factory, it is the example of successful workers' struggle against privatization of the factory. So the workers in 2005 have occupied the factory and have established a kind of self-management system. And so this really brave and positive story was chosen by Kurs, and they decided not to paint the mural somewhere in the public space of Ivanec, where the factory is positioned, not even in Zagreb, but in the factory hall as such, because they said we wanted to support the workers, we want to support their struggle, we want the mural to stay there for the future generation of workers who won't remember how it started. So this is the famous mural. These are the photos from the opening. It says "Factories to the workers," and it's also very present. I mean, in the latest TV show by Matanić is to be seen, and whatever. I don't know, in some union. As a union sign. So I will maybe stop here because I talk really a lot. Yeah.
Okay, hoćemo ovu pitanje ostaviti za kraj, ono drugo.
As you wish.
Okay, then. So always topic of Neli, not directly dedicated to the disappearance of one period on the example of industrial heritage. Still, I would like you, Neli, to present us as some introduction of your work, your project, Dry Cleaners Galeb. Because I was thinking why it's so important for me in that context. Actually, it appeared as one of the first reaction after the war. Immediately after the war finished. 1995, you did project in 1996. Yeah, and actually on some metaphorical way, but also documentary, all these changes are kept. And but also not only socio-political moment, and also your own history, which was also kept with this project. Yes.
Thank you, Rada. Dry Cleaners Galeb is a photographic cycle of the largest dry cleaners in the city of Split, where I am coming from. And I actually did these photographs. I'm not a photographer, and it was first time I took a photo camera, actually. I went to a residency in the United States where I had, what's the problem with the photos? Where I had been for the first time out of the country after the war. And my first reaction actually was to take photos of these dry cleaners. I can't explain why. It was very intuitive at the moment. It's a cycle of like 16 photos that are revealed in Cibachrome, installed as a photo ambience. And yeah, we can see them now. It was a place really like kind of purgatory. Also a place where I find all these clothes, war clothes actually, the clothes that blankets like things that were really present, and blankets from hospitals and etc. Mixed with actually everyday clothes, also clothes from weddings and funerals, and this kind of connection of these realities was really very important for me. Well, it's a kind of repertoire of war drapery mixed with the resistance of daily life. And also there is some people who worked then in these dry cleaners, Galeb. And this is a photo ambience I installed in 1999. Actually, the first time it was exposed in Umag-based gallery Dante Marino Cetina. And it was really, in a sense of metaphorical, as you said. It's a kind of really, first, it's a space that still has some socialist kind of traces, but also this war and post-war period, and also this way of losing these facilities, actually, because after we'll tell about the development of this project. So dry cleaners is a kind of metaphor of mass attempt to forget, to wash away bad war memories, but also it's a kind of a metaphor of washing away a history, or washing away individuals, of ethnical cleaning, and all these things that were happening in 90s, like first and first part of the 90s. So in time of conflict and emergence and disappearance of ideology, this purgatory of its own kind also connected two visual realities, as I said, socialistic, and the one that we entered in capitalistic and neoliberal ideologies. So also it's a kind of documentary of a space that is nowadays we don't have it anymore in the city of Split. It's disappeared from the center, from this space. And also the photographs I took, as I said, when I came back from United States, from the country where actually all this throwaway way is very present. It was very present also at the moment. So when I went to Mexico, where I lived from late 90s till 2012, I took this cycle with me. So, and also I took one coat, woven coat from wool that my aunt did. And these two objects, like these photos and this coat, in another culture, in another perspective, I really saw them as a kind of document of time, of erasure and the washing away of history of 90s. And then when I came to Mexico, I started a new project that based on this one. And it's, maybe we can go please to another. Aha, tu je, okay. Tu je, this project is named Strategies of Forgetting, or Oblivion Strategies, as I call them in the moment. And I took this woolen coat that you can see on some photos in different dry cleaners in Mexico City. And after also, when I came back in 2012, I again took it to dry cleaners Galeb. So it's a kind of process, really long process, like 20 years all together. And the interesting thing is that actually I use this photography as a kind of a register of this coat that was invisibly disappearing. But also, when I came back, I took photos of dry cleaners Galeb that is now on the screen. And that time already it was kind of, let's say, a touristic, I don't know, washing touristic clothes and apartment clothes. This work is consisted, strategies, oblivion strategies, consist of 12, let's say, 12 recipes of dry cleaners, and photo documentation in three books. So that's a story about Galeb.
Thank you, Neli. So you're always dealing with textile. I can. It's not always, of course, but your other project was connected with a huge project of Technical Museum Nikola Tesla in Zagreb. They did really magnificent overview of textile industry, and in this context with many workshops and beautiful exhibition called Tailored Futures, tailored for the futures.
No, Tailored Futures, question mark.
Tailored Future, question mark.
Yes.
Excuse me. Yeah, and in that project you were also invited to collaborate, and we discover, me for example, reading this catalog and when this exhibition was created and all this project, that first textile industry is first industry on the world actually.
Yeah.
Connected with the growth of capitalism.
Exactly.
Second, that in Croatia, every bigger city had a textile fabric, and also, and not only the big cities, then also smaller villages. And then that was more than hundreds of factories in Croatia. And also that was, that at least was, I don't know, 80, when in that process of transition, when war finished, in that process of privatization and transition, that actually 80,000 workers lost their jobs. That are completely crazy informations.
Yeah, because it was like 100,000 people working, mostly women, in textile industry in Croatia.
In Croatia, and that, and also this exhibition pointed at women workers as the first step of emancipation. That was also a very important topic. But I would like to ask you, you dedicate your project to the factory, small factory Dalmatinka in Sinj. And you started actually your collaboration with Dragana Modrić, curator that almost 9 years make researches of this factory. And actually, when I saw your works at the exhibition Tailored Future, with question mark, I was very impressed and very deeply impressed. And reading Dragana's text about your work, she said something which I found very truthful, very right for your work. And she said that she noticed that you actually find potential for the wider social engagement in the field of the senses. So I'm interested, please, to explain your secret, how you started that, and why you choose that object, not that one. So just a little bit to explain.
Yeah, the installation till the end of the thread, the name of the installation, Do Konca in Croatian, is actually process of deindustrialization on the example of Dalmatinka factory That's a yarn and thread factory that was in the city of Sinj, and it was very important for all the area of Cetina region and Sinj. And actually, I had some connection with Dragana Modrić, and I was invited in this great project. Here is Julia Grazin, the curator of the exhibition Tailored Futures. So I was very lucky to be invited in that project, and it was participatory project. It wasn't just exhibition. It was a lot of things going on, like workshops. And in one of these workshops that I made a concept for a workshop that was called Movements for Machines, Micro Choreography. And there it was in Sikirica Gallery in Sinj, where I asked women workers, there was few of them because it's very difficult to collaborate with people who lost their hopes, actually. And it was very important, this collaboration with Dragana and also Nikola Križanac and Jelena Pavlinušić, who made big investigation since 2014 about the factory, and who are based in Sinj. So they had all these connections and investigation and with these people who worked in the factory. So I asked them to remember, to kind of try to reconstruct the movements they remember from the time they worked in the factory. And one of them, Ana Radović, that you can see here, she worked on this machine spinning thread, I don't remember the name, but she worked almost all her life on that machine, like almost 30 years. So she was amazing because she really had kind of inside travel, like a time traveler. She really reconstructed in an empty space and completely out of context this movement that she did all this. We can go on with the presentation because we can see also the video of Anna. So, the installation itself consists of this vertical projection, Anna, and three two-side industrial clocks that are very important. This is Anna also with her installation. It was on exhibition in Sinj, curated by Dragana Modrić. And I just have to come back to the thought. Yeah, it consists of these three side clocks that we rescued from the factory Dalmatinka. And they stopped in the moment when the production stopped in 2009. So they are kind of ready-made. We could take out of the factory. Actually, these workshops we did in the moment when the factory was demolished. So after 2009 and this bankruptcy proceeding, this factory was sold to recently, actually in 2019, to the firm Business Park, who still, I don't know, they still haven't done this, what they thought to done, but it's like a business center, wedding, again, wedding, and I don't know, facilities for parties. So, the good thing that architecture, the skeleton of architecture is not demolished. So, yeah, we did this workshop and Anna really responded, I can say very proud and very kind of touching, for me was very touching, her movement and her kind of bodily memory, and also taking all this context with itself, no? So also the work consists of a film, experimental film, 15 minutes long, called actually Till the End of the Thread. And it's a film we did, I did with Darko Škrobonja, a photographer that I collaborate with. And we did like movie in 2017. Still there were some machines and some machines in the factory. And in 2018, when it was, everything was demolished. So we can see a little bit of that movie. So this factory, as you said, Vesna, you said about all these important factories that and Rada also said about textile factories. It was very important for this area and also for women, because it was very strong emancipation of women, because they started to be productive in a sense, and had big problems in the beginning, but after they really became like important part of the society. They were like, that's, I mean, with Dragana I discussed a lot of things, and it's so important maybe to mention some of them. And they are like all this kind of worker context in socialism. It was a kind of hero of socialism, the worker, because everything was based on worker. And in transition, they are all washed out. And that was the thing that really, really affected the generations that lost their hope for a future. No, they had really hard time to confront that. The other thing is this kind of, let's say, also poetic and political way of treating the subject, and also this distribution of sensible, in a sense of rancière, that was with Dragana also we were talking about. To establish kind of possibility that art can establish new connections, and through emotional even approach to change something in reality. I mean, it's like utopic completely, but I think it can change maybe in somebody, and put kind of energy and put visibility on the things that are completely out of focus, like a worker. So maybe.
Thank you, Neli, for the beautiful presentation. I would like now to give a word to Bojan, our youngest participants today. Actually, I already in my introduction mentioned one of her first photographs called "The Future," Budućnost, where is visible something which will be developed, especially in his last, fully presented in his one of his last projects. That was presented here in the Museum of Contemporary Art a few years ago, very close to the space where we are now. And this project attracted a lot of attention, although it was pandemic time. That were several guiding tours. I wanted to, of course, to stress that this project was also done in collaboration with the blog, Vesna Vuković, and other participants of blog. And this is a project about one factory in Croatia, one of the biggest factories of those subjects. It's about factory of fertilizers in the world. But this factory didn't collapse. And Bojan did very in a view from in comparison with projects that showed Vesna and then Neli's projects, it is, I would say, completely different in some way. I don't know if you agree, but it's a completely different approach, which is documentary, but also not only documentary, which is very interesting. And so I'm talking too much, so perhaps it's time that Bojan presents his own project, which called very funny association with subjects in school, history, chemistry, and society.
It's nature, chemistry, and society. I will refer shortly to what Vesna was saying, and maybe try to trace somehow my interests and my put in a context the period when I started to do photography. It was the period of 2000, early 2000s. I was born in 1987, and in this period, I was in early 2000s. I was studying at the Academy of Dramatic Arts. And from the early age, I had some kind of interest towards the environment and the questions of space and the world that surrounds me. In a way, I would say that as a photographer, I'm some kind of patient observers of the space, and I'm trying to figure out somehow through this long-term observation of the space to get some kind of understanding and some knowledge about the social processes and political processes that have defined the space that I live in. So with this work, which took me more than 10 years to complete, the first photographs I took was in 2009, I think, in this area, which is industrial waste, like a huge site where the plaster is disposed as a side product of industrial processes in the factory nearby. So the first pictures I took it attracted my attention because it looked like anything else that I could see. So I took close-ups, which I will show you, of this totally transformed of the land, which is totally transformed into something that looks like it doesn't come from this planet, so to say, and it is located in the middle of protected national park. So I was attracted to this visually, but then it wasn't enough for me. I was trying to, in a way, to find out more about the processes that made this territory look like this, and then it started. Through this, I started this long research, which has led me to the local factory nearby, fertilizer factory, the factory which uses natural gas as a resource to produce fertilizers, which are then used in the agriculture, in food production. And I was, in a way, through this photographic observation, tried to evoke this urban metabolism, which in a way shapes the life in the town of Kutina, but also in the area around the town. So in a way, it's a story about the urban space, but also the rural space around and the nature, and the transformation of the natural elements into something which transformation of the nature for the purpose of the urban life or of the life of the community. It's 15,000 people town where which is interesting as a case study because it's the example of the socialist modernization after Second World War. And many small towns in this period were developing through industrialization. But this example is particularly interesting because of the scale, where in such a tiny town there is such a huge factory. It's the biggest chemical plant in Croatia, and for the production of the fertilizers, it uses 1/4 of total gas consumption in the whole country. So it shows many contradictions in terms of the scale. When you look at it, it looks like larger than life, but then also in a certain way it produces life through this cycle of natural transformation, but also it is an engine of social life and life of the whole town. What I tried to do at this exhibition is putting together many photographs that I've been taking along this period of 10 years, and also connecting them together with the archival photographs from different sources in order to make some sort of cabinet of curiosities, we could say. So in this image you can see all the walls of the four walls of the gallery, which were painted green and covered with almost 200 different photographs. Some of them taken by me, and many of them taken or collected from different sources, from state archive, local municipal archives, Google Maps, press photographs and illustrations. And very important family albums and pictures taken by the amateurs, and also these archival pictures are taken in a period of last, let's say, 70 years. The period of industrialization of this town started before this socialist modernization project. It is a swampy area where oil and gas was extracted in the beginning of 20th century by international companies such as Shell. So in a way it was the territory was highly underdeveloped, like agrarian territory and agrarian life, where land was used as a resource for foreign companies to exploit. And a huge transformation of this territory through industrial modernization comes after Second World War, with this first with the change of the ownership, and then with huge investments in the in the factory, the biggest one in '68. So I will now show you some part of the exhibition, some pictures, which were part of this web of different associations, meanings, different registers of photographic representation, from the very private one to public one. For me it was really important to change the scale, which reflects in terms of the size of the pictures in a gallery, from very small one to very big one, but it also reflects changing the optics of the understanding the images and the processes behind them. So this factory, which is like bigger than life, and the images which are monumental, are combined with the very private and intimate images, which in a way triggers the imagination for understanding the social processes that shape the world that we live in. In a way, it triggers the imagination so that you can apply this also when you are viewing this web. It can be applied also to other territories and places which are not necessarily connected to this one. The way everyday life is captured visually and presented as this narrative, which is jumping in this scale from very macro and individual and private one to the scale of the historical themes and subjects or monumental photographic representation on a larger scale. So also in the way how you as a viewer browse through these images in a way activates your body and your also this mental and in a way intellectual processes. For me, it was important for this to be some visual journey in which you can immerse even without understanding the context, but then when you look piece by piece, you started to form narrative or different narratives actually, because the pictures which are spread all around the walls in a way trigger each other and reshape each other's meaning, which makes the narrative it brings like endless potential for the interpretations. But still, this interpretation are not only visual, but they have a structure, and it structures certain knowledge, which brings me back to the first point. For me, like spending more than 10 years in assembling this structure was also a way of understanding the processes and also learning about the social processes, and revisiting this huge archival material and reassembling it many times also reminds me of the way how we revisit history, and how we are going back in time in order to recalibrate our position in the present. So on this historic timeline, this process that I was dealing, it starts with the National Liberation War and this transformation of the ownership, which was during the exhibition marked by one text, witness about the local partisan group who attacked one of the oil wells, which was controlled by Nazi German army. So they took it down and burned the well, which is some kind of symbolic overturn, and it marks this moment of taking control over the natural resources, which are then engine of the life on all different levels, from food production to organization of the town in general. So it was really interesting to assemble these images that comes from the totally different worlds, formally, in terms of the form, but in terms of the content as well. But then when you revisit them and when you try to reinterpret them again and again, you can find different reasons why all these images are connected and how they form a singular narrative. So the first historic point was this act of taking down the resources, and one of the last moment, which brings us to present, are the images that we are seeing now, which are images from the trade union of the people who are working in this factory. Here it says Petrochemia is not for sale. This trade union is a really important example of really long and in a way successful workers' struggle against privatization in the early 90s, so from 90s to 2000s. For more than 20 years, this trade union with the incredible support of the local community were trying to postpone the process of privatization of this strategically important company, important from the national economy, from the agriculture, but of course also very important for the local community. So I tried to make this narrative understandable even without the knowledge, but then if you have the knowledge of these processes, then it becomes more intriguing. And for this visual reason, I decided to I decided to put many images to include many images in the exhibition, but I wanted to reduce the text because I didn't want to explain too much, and I think it really worked because it really was a visual journey. But I have included two texts. One about this partisan guerrilla action, which was a witness, like memoirs of the members who did this action, and the second text was by a person from the trade union who was organizing these huge demonstrations against privatization in the recent 20 years, and this text was transcript of the lecture that he held at the Faculty of Social Sciences during the student demonstration and blockade of the of the faculty, which was a demonstration against commercialization of the higher education. So that was it was this guy. So students invited him to tell the story of their successful struggle, and he started this lecture with saying, I feel a little bit uncomfortable because I never thought I would speak in front of the students. I have hardly got my high school degree. And then after that he started to saying this incredible story of how he has been negotiating with many prime ministers along these 20 years, and how he would, which tricks he was using in these negotiations, which was really interesting and valuable. But why I'm stressing out this point is that both this action, the partisan one and the trade union recent one, were examples of bottom-up self-organized actions, which comes from the understanding and importance of the engaging and taking power in your own hand, in a way. So I think that this were like key moments important for understanding the processes. The moment that we live in at the moment, like an inspiring lesson from our recent history. And here you can see a few shots of the exhibition layout. Thank you.
Thank you, Bojan. In between all these many photos, so so there is some paradoxical situation. In some moment you can see this fertile, nice nature, and in the other hand you can see completely waste terrain. So that's it's kind of paradox that you actually didn't explain in your description of project. And what is interesting to me that this was one of the rare factory that survived, actually. Why did that factory survived? First question, during the war, and second question about this landscape, very paradoxically different.
Well, from the, so to say, ecological perspective, this is in a way a contradictory and in a way a paradoxical example. But that's also the reason why it was so interesting to me. The fertilizers, the very concept of fertilizer, which could be from the point of contemporary ecology, criticized in the historic context of 20th century rise of the population, is important because it helped to reduce starvation all around the globe. Today, when we are speaking about the ecology, especially in the visual arts world, very often people forget that we still live in the world where things where industry is present. You know, there are very often you can hear the ideas that today we live in post-industrial world, in a completely digital world, which is detached from the material reality. And with this, I wanted to make a remind that the development and the living standard that we are enjoying today in a way is rooted in the material reality of the other world, and even though sometimes we don't see this industry and the production, because from many Western countries it was moved to Asian countries, still all the benefits of the modern world that we are using are part of this process. So I wanted to stress somehow this contradiction, but in one hand. On the other hand, I wanted somehow to make this distinction between the socialist modernization and the capitalist modernization or capitalist industrialization, because of course the living standard has its cost in the nature. How we use it, how we exploit the resources, how we manage it, and especially today we are aware that these resources are not endless, but on the way capitalist development is not taking it into account, and it's for me it was important to make this point and not just to think about ecology in some idealistic way.
Thank you, Bojan. So I would conclude our topic, perhaps with one question to you, Vesna. So, knowing that you are dealing with this topic for a long time and with many many projects and connection with artists, so how do you see in this frame of 30 years now, taking this Darko Bavoljak photo from the war period as a first document, how you see these changes in approach in art? So conclusion is that we have this topic alive and very intense during these years, but something changed.
Yeah, we can even go a bit further in the past when I see like photographs by Boris Cvjetanović from the 80s, or even in some, if we are looking for traces, we can see it in the works of Mladen Stilinović still, all the contradictions of developing of the late socialism, etc. But let's say I had in mind when we were preparing this conversation, to show maybe some of the important works, which I don't have time now. I guess I will just mention them. I guess the real page turner was a really monumental work by late also late, but Marijan Crtalić, Ironworks Sisak, which was after some period of thematizing unemployment, abandoned factories, in works by Sanja Iveković. I have Nada Dimić files in mind, or Andrea Kulunčić s nama, 1000 or 1908 employees, 15 warehouses, etc. There are many examples, and we see it, as Rada said at the beginning, if you really go detailedly, you will find traces, you will find single artworks and single positions. There is a lot of material, but when I was talking at the beginning, I wanted just to say that these that there are also dominant topics or prevailing aesthetics and politics, which is always related to some other things in society, to its imminent social and political context, but also some, I would say, also fashion academic topics. And the contemporary art is really very much dependent on the discourse, and So what we see in the last few years, and what also Bojan has included in his work, is another, I would say, even turn, if it's not too much to say it, towards ecological topics, which really now frame this issue of deindustrialization, even post-industrialization, as if it, as Bojan said, if we are not producing any longer, we just have sent it somewhere to the global south or east or Asia or whatever, and it's still, most of the world is still working in the industry, heavy industry, I would say, as well, in ecological wastelands. But what we can maybe see, and even Italian Pavilion, which is our host today, or co-host in some distant sense, also have this open this perspective towards some future which will have no machines or no industry, etc. And in all these works we can see no people at all, and they are mostly like post-apocalyptic or from some really post-human perspective. And it is actually, I mean, posthumanism is a huge academic topic, so I have to ask myself and you and whatever, we have all, it's a food for thought, whom are all these works addressing? Since, as Neli or Bojan has done, and even Crtalić in his famous work, they were really addressing people who were working or living, who have reached some higher standard, or the whole population who was having some effects and improvements in daily life, for the daily life of the industrialization, etc. And so I guess that the question for ending, it's an open question, but I believe it has to be asked, whom are all these post-apocalyptic, post-human sceneries, which we see all addressing at all, if not humans. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thanks to be patient for our presentation, and thank you to my dear participants, Vesna, Neli, and Bojan. Bye-bye to everybody.